The cargo ship Lucky Star shook violently as another bolt of lightning struck its hull. Dongwoo Kim gripped the pilot controls tighter, his knuckles white against the metal. The ion storm had come from nowhere, swallowing his small freighter like a hungry beast. Warning. Hull breach detected. Emergency landing required, announced Ji-hoon, the ship's AI system. The voice crackled through damaged speakers. Dongwoo's eyes scanned the instruments. Half the readouts showed red error messages. Through the viewport, he saw a green planet spinning closer and closer. The navigation system was dead, so he had no idea what world this was. All he knew was that he had maybe 10 minutes before impact. Ji-hoon, can you identify the planet? He asked while fighting to keep the ship stable. Systems damaged, cannot access. Star charts, the AI replied in broken sentences. The ship's nose dipped sharply. Dongwoo pulled hard on the controls, but the thrusters were failing. Trees rushed up to meet him through the thick atmosphere. He had time for one thought before the crash. I should have stayed home in Seoul. The impact threw him forward against his restraints. Metal screamed and tore around him. The ship bounced once, twice, then slammed into something solid. Everything went black. When Dongwoo woke up, smoke filled the cockpit. His head pounded and something warm ran down his forehead. Blood. He touched his face gingerly, then looked around the ruined control room. Sparks flew from broken panels and he could smell burning plastic. Ji-hoon? He called out. Silence. Dongwoo tried to stand but fell back down with a gasp of pain. His left leg bent at a wrong angle below the knee. Broken, definitely broken. He had been a medic in the military before becoming a cargo pilot, so he knew what a fracture looked like. Using his arms, he pulled himself toward the emergency kit mounted on the wall. Every movement sent waves of pain through his leg, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. The kit contained basic medical supplies, a small plasma cutter, and an emergency beacon. He activated the beacon first, but the display showed only static. Either it was broken or something was blocking the signal. Either way, no rescue was coming soon. Dongwoo used supplies from the kit to make a rough splint for his leg. It hurt terribly, but at least he could move without the bone grinding together. He then gathered what supplies he could carry: water tablets, protein bars, the plasma cutter, and a small medical scanner. The cargo bay door had been torn open during the crash. Dongwoo crawled through it into bright sunlight and fresh air. The planet looked beautiful and deadly at the same time. Huge trees with purple bark stretched up toward two small suns. Strange flowers glowed softly in the shadows, and somewhere in the distance something howled. The ship had crashed in a clearing beside what looked like crystal formations. They jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, catching and reflecting the sunlight in rainbow patterns. Dongwoo had never seen anything like them. He needed shelter and water. The howling in the distance suggested predators, and night would come eventually. Using a piece of metal from the ship as a walking stick, he began to search the area around the crystal formations. That was when he saw them. 3 creatures stood near the largest crystal, partially hidden by its glow. At first, Dongwoo thought they might be some kind of large insects. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized they were much more than that. The adult was about his height, but built differently. Its body was covered in what looked like translucent crystal armor that shifted colors in the light. It had 4 arms, each ending in delicate but strong-looking hands. Its head was elongated with large eyes that seemed to hold intelligence. The 2 smaller creatures were clearly young versions of the adult. They moved with quick, curious gestures, poking at fallen leaves and chittering to each other in high musical voices. Dongwoo froze. These were not just animals. They were people. Alien people, but definitely intelligent beings. And he had just crashed into their home. The adult noticed him first. Its crystal armor flashed bright red, and it made a sharp sound that sent the 2 youngsters scurrying behind the crystal formation. But they peeked out, still curious about the strange, soft-skinned visitor. Dongwoo slowly sat down on the ground, making himself look smaller and less threatening. He had learned in the military that sitting down was often the first step in peaceful contact. He held up his empty hands, showing he carried no weapons. The adult watched him carefully. Its armor shifted from red to yellow to a deep blue. Dongwoo wondered if the colors meant something, like emotions or warnings. One of the young ones crept closer. It was smaller than the other, and its crystal armor looked thinner, less developed. It reached toward a cut on its arm where a sharp rock had scraped it. Dark blue fluid leaked from the wound. Dongwu recognized an opportunity. Moving slowly, he pulled out his medical scanner and held it up so the adult could see it. Then he pointed to the young one's injured arm and made gentle, caring gestures. The adult's armor flashed several colors rapidly. It seemed to be thinking. After a long moment, it made a soft sound to the injured youngster. The small alien approached Dongwu cautiously. Up close, he could see that its eyes were like gems, multifaceted and bright with intelligence. It held out its hurt arm. Dongwu used the scanner to check the wound, then applied a healing gel from his medical kit. The cut was minor, and the gel would help it heal faster. As he worked, he spoke softly in Korean, knowing they would not understand the words but hoping his tone would sound kind. "There you go, little one. That should feel better soon." The young alien looked at its arm, then at Dongwu. It made a pleased chirping sound, and its armor glowed soft green. The adult stepped closer, its own armor now showing mostly blue with hints of other colors. It spoke in a musical language, and though Dongwu could not understand the words, he heard gratitude in the tone. As the suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Dongwu realized his life had just changed forever. He was stranded on an alien world with intelligent beings who seemed willing to accept his help. But in the growing darkness, something else was stirring. The howling he had heard earlier was getting closer, and the three aliens suddenly looked very afraid. The howling grew louder as darkness fell over the crystal clearing. Dongwu watched the adult alien's armor flash rapid patterns of red and orange. Even without understanding their language, he could tell these were warning colors. The alien made urgent chittering sounds to the two young ones. They responded immediately, pressing close to the adult's sides. The smaller one, the one Dongwu had helped, kept looking back at him with worry in its gem-like eyes. "Ji-hoon," Dongwu whispered into his damaged communicator. "Can you hear me?" Static answered him for several seconds. Then faintly the AI's voice crackled through. "Dongwu, sensors show. Large heat signatures. Approaching your location, 7, maybe 8. Moving in coordination. Pack hunters." Dongwu's military training kicked in immediately. Whatever was coming, it was organized and dangerous. He looked at the alien family huddled by the crystal formation. They were afraid, but they had not run away. Maybe they could not outrun whatever was hunting them. The adult alien seemed to notice Dongwu's alertness. It pointed toward the wreckage of his ship, then made gestures that looked like questions. Dongwu understood. It wanted to know if he had weapons. He held up the small plasma cutter from his emergency kit. It was designed for cutting metal, not fighting, but it was better than nothing. The alien's armor shifted to darker colors and it shook its head. Not enough. A new sound joined the howling. Something was crashing through the forest, getting closer. Trees cracked and fell. Whatever was coming was big and did not care about stealth anymore. Dongwu made a decision. He gestured toward his crashed ship, then pointed to a small cave opening he had noticed in the crystal formation. The alien understood immediately. Shelter was better than being caught in the open. Moving as fast as his broken leg would allow, Dongwu led the alien family toward the cave. The adult helped support him, its crystalline hands surprisingly warm against his arm. The young ones stayed close, their armor glowing faintly in the darkness. They had just reached the cave entrance when the first predator emerged from the tree line. Dongwu had seen dangerous animals before, but nothing like this. The creature stood 3 meters tall on 6 powerful legs. Its body was covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. Acid dripped from its jaws, hissing where it hit the ground. Its eyes glowed yellow in the darkness, and they were fixed on the small alien family. 6 more creatures stepped out of the shadows behind it. They moved with the coordination of experienced hunters, spreading out to surround the crystal formation. One of them opened its mouth and let out a sound that was part roar, part scream. The adult alien pushed the young ones behind it and extended spikes from its arms. Its armor blazed with angry red patterns, but Dongwu could see the fear underneath the defiance. These predators had hunted the crystal people before. "Ji-hoon," he whispered. "Emergency power. Can you overload any of the ship's systems? Power cells. Could be rigged to explode. But you would need to set them manually." Dongwu looked at the predators, then at the aliens who had shown him kindness. He thought of the small one whose arm he had healed. These creatures wanted to kill children. "Tell me how to do it," he said. While Ji-hoon explained the process through bursts of static, Dongwu began gathering materials from his ship's wreckage. The predators were taking their time, circling closer but not attacking yet. They seemed to enjoy terrorizing their prey. The adult alien watched Dongwu work with confusion. It could not understand what the human was doing, but it seemed to sense his determination. When one of the predators moved closer to the young ones, the alien mother stepped forward with a threatening display. The lead predator responded by spitting a stream of acid that barely missed her head. The liquid hit the crystal formation behind her, and the stone began to smoke and dissolve. That was when Dongwu finished his preparations. He had rigged 3 of the ship's power cells to overload in sequence. It would not be a huge explosion, but it might be enough to scatter the pack or at least give them time to escape. He just needed to get the predators in the right position. "Hey!" he shouted, stepping out of the cave. "Over here, you ugly monsters." The predators turned toward him. Their glowing eyes showed interest in this new soft-looking prey. The lead creature took several steps in his direction. Dongwu activated his plasma cutter and waved it in the air. The bright energy beam got their attention. He began backing toward the spot where he had hidden the rigged power cells, trying to look like he was retreating in fear. The adult alien made urgent sounds, trying to warn him to come back. But Dongwu kept moving, leading the predators away from the family. 5 of the 7 creatures followed him. That left 2 still threatening the aliens, but it was better than 7. The lead predator was almost close enough now. Dongwu just needed it to take a few more steps, but the smaller alien youngster chose that moment to make a sound. It was trying to help, maybe trying to distract the predators from Dongwu. The noise made one of the creatures spin around and focus on the cave entrance. The predator began moving toward the young aliens with acid dripping from its jaws. The adult alien mother stepped between them, her spikes extended and her armor blazing with protective fury. But she was outnumbered. Dongwu saw what was about to happen. The predator was going to spit acid at the young ones, and their soft, undeveloped armor would not protect them. He made a choice that would change everything. Instead of triggering his trap, Dongwu ran toward the cave as fast as his broken leg would carry him. Pain shot through his body with every step, but he did not slow down. The predator was already opening its mouth, acid building up for a killing shot. Dongwu reached the youngsters just as the creature spat its deadly stream. He threw his body over both small aliens, using himself as a shield. The acid hit his back and shoulders, burning through his jacket and into his skin. The pain was incredible, but he held on, covering the children with his body. The adult alien's scream of rage shook the crystal formations. Her protective instincts exploded into fury, and she launched herself at the predator with spikes flashing. But there were still 6 more creatures closing in, and Dongwu was badly hurt. As consciousness began to fade from the acid burns, he managed to press the detonator for his makeshift bombs. The explosions lit up the night, and the sound of the predator's angry roars told him that at least some of them had been caught in the blast. But he had saved the children. As darkness took him, Dongwu felt the small aliens moving safely beneath his protective embrace, and he knew it had been worth it. Pain brought Dongwu back to consciousness. His back felt like it was on fire, and every breath sent new waves of agony through his body. But he was alive, and more importantly, he could hear soft chittering sounds beneath him. The young aliens were safe. He tried to lift himself up, but gentle hands pressed him back down. The adult alien was kneeling beside him, her crystalline armor now glowing with soft blue and green patterns. She spoke in her musical language, and though he could not understand the words, her tone was urgent and caring. "The youngsters?" he whispered. One of the small aliens poked its head up from beneath his arm. Its armor was bright and healthy, unmarked by acid. The other young one appeared on his other side, chirping softly. Both were unharmed. The adult alien began working on his wounds. She produced a clear, thick liquid from somewhere in her armor and spread it gently across the acid burns on his back. The substance felt cool and immediately began to ease the pain. Within minutes, Dongwu could feel his damaged skin beginning to heal. "Thank you," he said, not knowing if she understood but hoping she could hear the gratitude in his voice. She responded by placing one of her crystalline hands over his heart. Her touch was warm despite her crystal appearance, and she spoke a long phrase in her musical language. The 2 youngsters joined her, each placing a small hand on his arms. Dongwu did not understand what was happening, but it felt important. Sacred, even. The family was performing some kind of ritual around him. and their armor glowed with colors he had not seen before, deep purples and golds that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their voices. Over the next few days, as Dongwu recovered from his injuries, he began to learn more about his alien rescuers. The adult female was called Naya, though the sounds of her name were difficult for his human throat to pronounce properly. The larger youngster was Cree, and the smaller one was Pip. Pip had taken a special liking to Dongwu ever since he had healed the small cut on its arm. The young alien followed him everywhere, chattering in its musical language and showing him interesting rocks and glowing flowers. Cree was more cautious but seemed to accept that the soft human was now part of their family group. Through gestures and simple drawings in the dirt, Naya taught Dongwu about their world. The crystal formations were their homes, grown rather than built. The glowing flowers were food sources, and the creatures that had attacked them were called something that sounded like shadow killers in her language. But it was what Naya told him about their customs that changed everything. She drew pictures in the sand showing different scenarios, a figure protecting others, another figure being cared for by a family. She pointed to herself, then to the youngsters, then to Dongwu. She spoke a word that kept repeating, Velthanor. When Ji-hoon's systems came back online briefly, Dongwu asked the AI to analyze the sounds he had recorded. The word appears to mean bond parent or chosen family. The AI explained through crackling speakers. Based on the context, it seems you have been adopted into their family structure through some kind of ritual. Dongwu thought back to the ceremony they had performed while he was wounded. What kind of ritual? Unknown, but the linguistic patterns suggest it may be permanent and carry significant cultural obligations. That evening, as the two suns set and bathed the crystal clearing in purple light, Naya approached Dongwu with something in her hands. It was a small crystal formation, no bigger than his palm, but it glowed with the same colors as her armor. She held it out to him and spoke carefully in her language, then tried to use gestures to explain. She pointed to herself, then to Pip and Cree, then to him. She held up the crystal and made it glow brighter. Family, Dongwu said in Korean, understanding suddenly. You're saying we're family now? Naya's armor brightened with what he had learned were happy colors. She nodded and pressed the crystal into his hands. The moment he touched it, it began to glow with colors that matched his heartbeat. Pip and Cree came over and each touched the crystal as well. Their armor synchronized with its glow, and for a moment, all four of them seemed connected by light and warmth. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by new sounds from the forest. Not the howling of the shadow killers, but something different. Mechanical sounds. Engines. Ji-hoon's voice crackled through the communicator. Dongwu, picking up human ship signatures. They are looking for you. Dongwu's heart sank. A rescue mission had found his crash site. Under normal circumstances, he would have been overjoyed. But now the thought of leaving Naya, Pip, and Cree felt like abandoning his family. Worse, he realized that human contact could be dangerous for the crystal people. If his species discovered an intelligent alien race, there would be scientists, soldiers, and colonists following soon after. The peaceful life that Naya's people lived might be destroyed forever. Naya seemed to understand the problem as well. Her armor flashed through worried colors as the engine sounds grew louder. She looked at Dongwu, then at her children, then back at him. The question in her gem-like eyes was clear. What do we do now? Pip and Cree moved closer to Dongwu, their small hands clutching at his arms. They had bonded with their strange soft father and did not want to lose him. But they could also sense their mother's fear about the approaching humans. The crystal in Dongwu's hand pulsed with warm light, reminding him of the oath he had somehow taken. He had become Velthanor, a bond parent to these alien children. That meant he had responsibilities he was only beginning to understand. In the distance, a human voice called out through a loudspeaker, Dongwu Kim, this is Captain Hanul Park of the cargo vessel Starfinder. If you can hear this, signal your location. Dongwu looked at his alien family, then at the crystal in his hand, then toward the sound of the rescue ship. His old life was calling him back, but his new life was asking him to stay. The choice he made in the next few minutes would determine the fate of two species and the family bonds that had grown between them. As the ship sounds grew closer, Dongwu realized he was about to face a test that would prove whether his adoption into the Crystal People's family was real or just a beautiful dream? Naya placed her hand on his shoulder, her armor showing colors of trust and determination. Whatever decision he made, she would stand by him. But the approaching humans threatened everything they had built together, and time was running out. The human rescue ship landed in the clearing with a roar of engines that sent the crystal formation singing in harmonious vibrations. Dongwu watched from behind one of the larger crystals as 3 people in environmental suits stepped out of the ship. Captain Hanul Park removed her helmet, revealing a worried face and graying hair. Behind her came Dr. So-Young Lee, a xenobiologist whose eyes were already scanning the strange crystal formations with scientific curiosity. The third person was Lieutenant Tae-Min Choi, whose hand rested on his weapon as he surveyed the area for threats. "Spread out and search for Kim," Captain Park ordered. "His emergency beacon went dead weeks ago, but the crash debris is fresh." Dongwu felt Naya's tension through their bond crystal, which pulsed with anxious colors. Pip and Kree pressed close to him, their young armor flickering with fear. They could sense that these newcomers represented danger to their family. "I have to go to them," Dongwu whispered to Naya. "If I don't, they'll search the whole area. They might find your people." Naya's armor flashed rapid patterns of worry and reluctance. She touched the crystal in his hand, making it glow brighter. Through gestures and the few words they shared, she made it clear. The bond between them was real, and she did not want to lose her chosen family member. But Dongwu also understood her deeper fear. Discovery by humans could mean the end of her people's hidden way of life. He made his decision and stepped out into the clearing. "Captain Park." "I'm here." The 3 humans spun toward his voice. Captain Park's face showed relief, but Dr. Lee's expression shifted to fascination as she noticed his alien companions emerging from behind the crystals. "My God," Dr. Lee breathed.
"Dongwu, are those?"
"Intelligent beings," Dongwu said firmly. "This is their world, and they saved my life." Lieutenant Choi's hand moved closer to his weapon. "Sir, we need to establish whether these creatures pose a threat." "They're not creatures," Dongwu snapped. "They're people, and the only threat here is what we might do to them." Naya stepped forward, her armor displaying careful blue patterns that Dongwu had learned meant peaceful intentions. She spoke in her musical language, and though the other humans could not understand her words, her tone was clearly diplomatic. Dr. Lee activated her recording equipment. "This is incredible. First contact with a new species. Do you realize what this means for science?" "I realize what it means for them," Dongwu replied. "Once word gets out, this place will be crawling with researchers, military units, and colonists. Their peaceful life will be over." Captain Park studied the alien family, then looked at Dongwu. "You seem attached to them." Before Dongwu could answer, a new voice joined the conversation. An elderly figure emerged from the tree line, followed by several other crystal people. This was Elder Thray, the leader of Naya's community, and he did not look pleased. Elder Thray's armor displayed deep red and purple patterns as he spoke rapidly to Naya in their language. Even without understanding the words, everyone could tell he was angry about the human presence. "What's he saying?" Captain Park asked. Dongwu had learned enough of their language to understand the general meaning. "He's saying that Naya has brought danger to their people by bonding with me. He wants to know if the humans can be trusted." Dr. Lee stepped forward eagerly. "Tell him we're scientists. We just want to learn about their culture and technology. This could be beneficial for both our species." But Elder Thray's armor flashed angry red when Dongwu translated her words. The old alien spoke again, his voice carrying clear authority. "He says they've seen what happens when powerful species want to learn from weaker ones," Dongwu translated reluctantly. "They've been hiding from the galaxy for good reason." Lieutenant Choi activated his communicator. "Command, this is Lieutenant Choi. We found Kim, but we also have a situation. Unknown intelligent species, potentially hostile. Requesting backup." "No." Dongwu stepped between the soldier and his communicator. "You can't call in military units. These people have done nothing wrong. Sir, step aside. This is a first contact situation, and protocol requires treating them with respect," Captain Park interrupted. "Stand down, Lieutenant, but the damage was done." Elder Thray had heard enough to understand that more humans were being summoned. His armor blazed with warning colors as he spoke to the other crystal people. Several of them began extending spikes from their limbs. The situation was about to turn violent when Pip, the smallest alien, broke away from Naya and ran to Dongwu. The young one wrapped its arms around his leg and looked up at the other humans with frightened but determined eyes. The simple gesture stopped everyone in their tracks. Here was an alien child seeking protection from a human, showing trust that transcended species barriers. Dr. Li lowered her recording equipment. "How long have you been living with them, Dongwu?" "Long enough to become part of their family," he said, lifting Pip into his arms. "They have a bonding ritual. When I protected their young from predators, I became what they call Velthanor, a chosen parent." Elder Thray spoke again, and this time his tone was different. Not angry, but testing. "He wants to know if my bond with Naya's family is strong enough to pass their trials." Dongwu translated. "He's offering to test whether I'm truly worthy to be Velthanor." Captain Park looked confused. "What kind of tests?" "Tests that will prove whether I really belong with them or whether I should return to human space," Dongwu said. He looked at the crystal in his hand, then at Naya and her children, then at his fellow humans. "Tests that might determine the future of both our species." Elder Thray gestured toward a complex crystal formation deeper in the forest. Several other alien adults had gathered there, their armor showing colors of ceremony and judgment. "If I fail the tests, I lose my bond with this family and have to leave with you," Dongwu explained to the other humans. "If I pass, I become a permanent bridge between our peoples and we find a way to protect their civilization while allowing limited contact." "And if we refuse to accept their conditions?" Lieutenant Choi asked. Elder Thray seemed to understand the soldier's aggressive tone even without translation. His response made the crystal formations around them begin to glow with ominous energy. "Then they disappear back into their hidden cities, and your backup forces will find nothing but empty crystals," Dongwu said quietly. "They've been hiding from galactic civilization for centuries. They know how to vanish." Dr. Li looked torn between scientific fascination and ethical concern. "What do the tests involve?" Dongwu asked Elder Thray, who responded with a long explanation accompanied by gestures. "3 trials," Dongwu translated. "First, I must prove I'm willing to sacrifice my own needs for the family's good. Second, I must solve a problem that affects the children's future. Third, I must demonstrate that my emotional bond with them is genuine and permanent." Naya approached and placed her hand on his arm. Her armor showed colors of encouragement and love. She spoke softly in her language. "She says she believes in me," Dongwu said, his voice thick with emotion. "She says that what we've built together is worth fighting for." Captain Park studied the scene, the alien family clustering protectively around Dongwu, the other crystal people watching from the trees, the potential for either peaceful contact or complete concealment. "All right," she said finally. "We'll witness these trials. But Lieutenant Choi, no more calls for backup until we see how this plays out." The soldier looked unhappy but nodded. Dr. Li began preparing her equipment to record everything. They prepared to move deeper into the crystal forest. Dongwu felt the weight of 2 civilizations resting on his shoulders. The trials ahead would determine not just his personal fate, but the future relationship between humans and the hidden crystal people. Pip chirped softly from his arms, and Cree took his hand with small crystalline fingers. Naya walked beside him, her armor glowing with colors of hope and determination. Whatever the trials brought, at least he would face them as part of a family. The trial grounds were more beautiful than anything Dongwu had ever seen. Crystal formations spiraled up toward the sky like frozen music, each one singing a different note when the wind passed through them. Elder Thray and 6 other crystal people arranged themselves in a circle, their armor displaying formal ceremonial patterns. Captain Park, Dr. Li, and Lieutenant Choi watched from a respectful distance as Naya led Dongwu to the center of the circle. Pip and Cree stayed close to him, their young armor flickering with nervous energy. Elder Thray spoke in the musical crystal language, and Dongwu translated for the watching humans. He says the first trial is the test of sacrifice. I must prove I'm willing to give up something important for the good of the family. The elder gestured toward the human rescue ship, then spoke again. He's saying that if I'm truly Velthanor, I should be willing to send the rescue ship away permanently. To prove I choose this family over my old life. Captain Park stepped forward. Dongwu, you don't have to do this. We can take you home right now. But as she spoke, Lieutenant Choi's communicator crackled to life. Lieutenant Choi, this is Admiral Yoonji Song. We've detected your first contact situation. Fleet Command is sending a full diplomatic mission with military escort. Eat us 6 hours. Elder Thray's armor flashed angry red as he understood the meaning of the transmission. Several other crystal people began extending spikes from their limbs. The human military was coming, and that meant potential invasion in their minds. Dongwu felt the weight of the moment. He could go with Captain Park's ship and avoid the trials entirely. But that would mean abandoning Naya, Pip, and Kree. And it would also mean a potential war between the arriving human fleet and the crystal people. I choose to stay, he said firmly. But I want the rescue ship to carry a message to the fleet. Tell them that first contact has been established peacefully, and any military action will destroy that peace. Captain Park nodded slowly. I'll make sure Admiral Song gets the message. Elder Thray's armor shifted to calmer colors as Dongwu's words were translated. The first trial was passed. For the second trial, the test of wisdom, Elder Thray led them to a smaller crystal formation where Pip lay curled up, clearly sick. The young one's armor was flickering weakly, and its breathing was labored. Elder Thray explained the situation through gestures and words that Dongwu partially understood. Pip has a disease that affects crystal people children, he translated. Their armor isn't fully developed, so they can't process certain nutrients properly. The traditional cure requires a rare mineral that was destroyed when my ship crashed into their mining area. Dr. Lee stepped forward with her medical scanner. May I examine the child? Naya looked at Dongwu, seeking his guidance. He nodded, and she gave permission. The doctor ran her scanner over Pip's small form, frowning at the results. The child's calcium and silicon levels are critically low. Its exoskeleton is dissolving from the inside. Dongwu knelt beside Pip, his heart breaking as the little one looked up at him with dimming, gem-like eyes. This was the child who had first accepted him, who had followed him around with endless curiosity and trust. What if we used human medical technology? He asked Dr. Lee. Could you synthesize what Pip needs? Not with what I have here, she said. But the minerals exist in your crashed ship's hull. If we could extract and purify them. Dongwu looked at the wreckage of his ship, then at Pip. Do it. Take whatever you need from the Lucky Star. Working together, Dongwu and Dr. Lee spent hours extracting and processing materials from the ship's hull. Elder Thray watched with growing respect as the human worked tirelessly to save one of their young. When they finally produced a treatment that Dr. Lee believed would work, Dongwu was the one who administered it to Pip. He held the young alien gently while the medicine took effect, whispering comfort in both Korean and the few crystal words he had learned. Pip's armor began to glow more brightly. The little one sat up and chirped happily, then threw its arms around Dongwu's neck. Elder Thray nodded approvingly. The second trial was passed. The third trial, the test of unity, was the most personal. Elder Thray spoke at length, gesturing toward Naya, Pip, and Kree. He wants to know if my bond with this family is based on gratitude or genuine love, Dongwu translated. He says many bonds seem strong at first but break under pressure. As if summoned by his words, the pressure arrived. Admiral Song's voice boomed across the clearing from Lieutenant Choi's communicator. This is Admiral Song to all personnel. We have detected unauthorized first contact with an unknown species. All humans are ordered to evacuate immediately for debriefing and quarantine. Elder Thray's armor flashed with alarm. The other crystal people began moving toward defensive positions. They thought the humans were preparing to attack. Admiral, Captain Park spoke into the communicator. The situation is stable. We recommend, Captain Park, you are relieved of command for failing to follow first contact protocols. Lieutenant Choi, extract all personnel immediately. Lieutenant Choi drew his weapon and pointed it at the crystal people. I'm sorry, but you're all coming with us. Admiral's orders. That was when Dongwu made his final choice. He stepped between the soldier's weapon and his alien family, spreading his arms wide to shield them just as he had shielded the children from the acid-spitting predators. No, he said quietly. I won't let you destroy what we've built here. Sir, step aside or You'll be forced to shoot me first, Dongwu said. These people saved my life, accepted me into their family, and trusted me with their children. I won't betray that trust. Naya moved to stand beside him, her armor blazing with protective colors. Pip and Kree joined them, their small forms showing no fear as they faced down the armed human. Dr. Lee looked at her scanner readings, then at the crystal family. Lieutenant, lower your weapon. These readings show they're not hostile, they're terrified. The Admiral ordered. The Admiral isn't here, Captain Park said, finding her authority again, and I'm still in command until she arrives. Elder Thray watched the confrontation with calculating eyes. Then he did something unexpected. He approached Dongwu and placed his crystalline hand over the human's heart, just as Naya had done during the bonding ritual weeks ago, speaking in careful, accented human words that he had clearly been learning. Elder Thray said, "You choose family over people." Dongwu looked at Naya, at Pip and Kree, at the crystal people who had risked everything to accept a strange alien into their midst. Then he looked at Captain Park and Dr. Lee, humans who represented his old life and his own species. "They are my people now too," he said. "I choose both. I choose to be a bridge." Elder Thray's armor shifted through several color patterns before settling on warm gold. He spoke in his own language, then gestured toward the approaching sounds of more human ships. "He says I've passed all 3 trials," Dongwu translated, "and he has a proposal for Admiral Song when she arrives." When the Admiral's ship landed an hour later, she found an unprecedented scene. Dongwu sat in a circle with both humans and crystal people, translating between the 2 species as they negotiated humanity's first interstellar treaty with a hidden civilization. The crystal people would reveal themselves gradually, sharing some technology and knowledge in exchange for protection of their world and people. Dongwu would serve as the first ambassador, living permanently on the crystal world but maintaining ties to human space. Pip climbed into his lap during the negotiations, its armor glowing with healthy colors. Kree leaned against his shoulder. Naya sat beside him, her hand on his arm, her armor showing the deep purple patterns that meant eternal family bond. 6 months later, Dongwu stood on the observation deck of the newly built embassy station, orbiting the crystal world. Through the transparent walls, he could see both human ships and crystal formations floating in space like living art. Pip and Kree were playing with human children in the station's garden, their different biologies creating no barriers to friendship. Dr. Lee worked alongside crystal scientists in laboratories where both species learned from each other. Captain Park commanded the small fleet that protected the system from unwanted intrusion. Naya joined him at the observation window, her armor glowing with contentment patterns. She had learned to speak basic Korean, just as he had become fluent in her musical language. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your old life for us?" Dongwu touched the crystal pendant he wore around his neck, the same one she had given him during his adoption into their family. It pulsed with warm light that matched his heartbeat. "I didn't give up my old life," he said. "I made it bigger. Big enough to include 2 species, 2 families, 2 worlds." Pip ran up and tugged on his hand, chattering excitedly about something it had learned in school. Kree followed, showing off a picture it had drawn of their mixed human crystal family. As Dongwu knelt to admire their work, he realized that the scars on his back, the marks he had earned shielding alien children from acid, had become symbols of something beautiful. They were proof that love and sacrifice could build bridges across the vast distances between species. And that family was not limited by the shape of one's body or the color of one's blood. In choosing to protect Naya's young with his own flesh, he had discovered